Welcome back. We're talking about the ongoing battle against ISIL. Let's get back to our panel right now. Majid, when we look at these very stubborn divisions, sectarian divisions that we find in Iraq, ISIL, in a sense, claims that it represents the interests of Sunnis in Iraq, but there are other armed groups in the country as well. If we look at Syria, there are armed groups there as well. What is the risk of this fighting continuing with different players?
The risk of that, as you rightly pointed out, is you will have more and more groups and more complicated situations, not just in Syria, but also in Iraq. The fight against ISIS in Iraq, the coalition-led fight against ISIS in Iraq, has overshadowed real problems inside the Iraqi society and what's going on. You have, as some of your guests mentioned, some of those issues. You have three major issues, which is the role of Sunni Arabs in political process in Iraq. Will they be finally accepted in Baghdad? The second question is the future of Kurds in Iraq. The Kurds absolutely want to get their own independence. They said that again, and they will have a referendum in September 25. That's another issue of this fight in Syria and Iraq. Continue against ISIS and other extremist groups. I would say that the state institution, whatever is left of it, or social institution in Iraq and in Syria, it will deteriorate further into a chaos that I don't think there's no major international or local power can ever control again. The longer this fight goes on, the more deterioration we will see in social and political fabric of both Iraqi and Syrian society.
Kamran, given the conflict that we're seeing there, do you see any kind of long-lasting peace in Iraq, in a unitary state, albeit with some kind of safeguards being put in? Because if ISIL is defeated, what are the future of Sunnis? I mean, will they be marginalized? Will they become some kind of permanent underclass? And could we see resentment that could result in the emergence of yet another group?
The transnational ideology of the caliphate of jihadism that Daesh is pushing and others like it, Al-Qaeda is in Syria. The other Syrian rebel groups also are subscribers to some form of Salafi jihadism. This exists because Iraq and Syria, as we have known them as nation states, are gone. They don't exist. They exist on paper. The United Nations will continue to refer to them as Iraq and Syria. But at the risk of sounding politically incorrect, I do want to point out that we need to come to grips with the reality where Iraq is shattered and Syria is shattered. We are having a referendum for the Kurds in September. And that's just sort of the Kurds acknowledging a ground reality, which is that the Kurds have been on their own for a very long time, and they want to formalize that. They want to move beyond that. The Shia dominate whatever we call Iraq. Iraqi nationalism does not exist as it used to exist from the time of independence from 1920 until 2003 under the Ba'athist regime, and prior to that with the monarchy. Syria, there are four Syrias. There is Kurdish Syria. There is ISIS land. There is regime-held territory. And then there is Idlib under the control of Al-Qaeda. And you have the pockets and enclaves of rebels. I just don't see how this Humpty Dumpty is going to be put back together anytime soon.
Right, Mazen, what do you think? I mean, these are profound changes that Kamran is talking about here. Really, it's new realities on the ground in these two countries. Do you also believe that, Syria as we know it, Iraq as we know it, don't exist anymore? It's over.
Well, that's being very, very pessimistic from standpoint of Kamran. But I think Iraq still exists in reality. I think the vast majority of Iraqis, I can't speak for Syrians, but I can speak for Iraqis, the vast majority are looking forward to a unity government. Unless we have secular parties running the country, nothing will change. If we have a party supported by Iran, another party supported by Turkey, another party supported by Israel, another party supported by Qatar, of course we won't build another Iraq. Iraq as a national state must regroup under secular governments. And that is why we appeal. The reason why we have a foundation in Washington that we formed a couple of weeks ago is to appeal for a secular government and have the United States and all partners of Iraq, whether it's Saudi Arabia or Iran or Turkey, to support secularism in Iraq. If we have a party that's only for Kurds, another party that's only for Shia, another party only for Christian, well, this is how you break up a country. But most countries in the world have political parties that represent all nationals of that country, like the Democratic Party or the Labour Party in England, and so on. In Iraq, we don't have a single political party that is an Iraqi party. One is called a Shia party. The other is called a Sunni party. Some of the guests you're talking about are talking about Sunni and Shia. I look at myself as an Iraqi, only as an Iraqi, not as a Sunni or a Shia or a Kurd or an Arab, and so on. And this is the core of the problem. When the United States came and, thank God, helped us to get rid of Saddam, the mistake that they did is they looked at Iraq as a Sunni, Shia, and so on. Iraq should be looked at as one homogeneous society. Yes, we have Kurds. Yes, we have Turkomans. Yes, they all have. But if we look at Iraq as 18 provinces, where each province is decentralized, instead of saying a Kurdish north and a Sunni center and a Shiite south, let's look at it 18 provinces that are decentralized and compete with each other economically and not militarily.
Okay, Kamran, you want to respond to that?
I mean, what we want and what we have are very different things. And this is a variance that is much underappreciated, not just in this region, but around the world. Ideally, I'm with Mazen. But do we have secular parties? Unfortunately, political principles on all sides are ethnic and sectarian and Islamist in nature. It's not just Shia as a secular entity. As he rightfully pointed out, we have parties that are under the heavy influence of Iran, and there are Islamist Shia parties that feeds Salafi jihadism on the Sunni side, that feeds Kurdish desire for secession and separatism on their side. So we have, these centrifugal forces that are pulling Iraq apart. We don't want Iraq to fall apart, but we must contend that there are no arresters in its path towards fragmentation.
Right, Majid, what are your thoughts on this? The Kurds, for one, want their own state, don't they?
Absolutely, and Iraq, as an idea, as a homogeneous society, as a unified country, is what, as I said, is an idea. It doesn't exist on the ground, and even before the 2003 U.S. invasion of Iraq, the underlying issue among the three major components of Iraq, Shiites, Sunnis, Kurds, existed, but it was only covered, and the international community didn't see it, and there was not much access of media. Iraq has always been had issues, major issues, not as much as we have it right now. What we have right now on the ground is we have an Iraqi government that its power does not go beyond Mosul. The Kurdish-controlled areas are controlled by the Kurdistan regional government. The Kurds are not just making a referendum, but from what I'm hearing from Kurdish leadership, they very much are very serious about declaring their own state. They say we have a serious offer for international community, which is a Kurdistan region, a Kurdish state that has close ties to Baghdad, a proxy to NATO and the United States, and a stabilizer in the Middle East. That is their offer for international community. So on the ground, I don't see any, it's not pessimism, I believe it's realism to say, I don't see any future for the Iraq as we know it. There might be a future for the Iraq, but that Iraq will be definitely without the Kurds, or at least without the political process that we used to have in the pre-ISIS area, which was before 2014 when the Mosul fell to ISIS.
Ahmed Rushdie, of course, we're talking about the politics of this country, Iraq. We're talking about sectarian differences. There is another reality in the country, and that's the fate of people who've been caught in these battles. People in the city of Mosul, for instance. Thousands have been killed, hundreds of thousands have fled, and as the Iraqi general pointed out in our report at the beginning of the program, many of those who remain in the city right now are being used as human shields. What do we know about the fate of those people left in that city?
Well, we all know that the casualties of war against Daesh is actually, it's a huge numbers. Start with, before 2 years, the UN said that we will have at about, let's say, 1 million, maybe 1.5 million refugees if the battle will take on against Daesh. So it's supposed to be that, according to these statistics, the Iraqi government prepared a plan for those refugees. At that time, it's supposed to be at that time. But the problem is that we are looking to the to the military actions rather than the human aspects of the military actions. So that's why we are now looking for so many casualties, bombing casualties, Daesh casualties, the refugees. We reached about 1 million or something like that for the Mosul people. But at the end, it's the responsibility of the Iraqi government to solve all these problems. Now, for Iraq, for the sovereignty of Iraq, for the unity of Iraq, it's also the responsibility of the Iraqi government, which is supposed to be inclusive, and also who is getting the power. It's the National Alliance. They're supposed to have the power. Now they have I think, a very important chance, and I think it's historical, is that how we can unify Iraq again after ISIS, because in September we have a referendum, which means that it will be two major problems for the National Alliance, is that there are destroyed Sunni areas. At the same time, they have, well, Iraq has a referendum at September for the Kurdistan. So it means that they must solve these two problems in a way to stay on Iraq as a unified Iraq. Because at the end, if they didn't do something like that, Iraq will fall apart.
Okay, and that's where we have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for being with us.